Hello, darling. Hello there. Hi. And he's still a little bit wet because he had a shower due to a muddy walk.
Oh,
So,
hello, beautiful. Oh,
are you going to say hello?
no, I'm a bit shy, I think. Yeah,
Not you, but he's just woken up. So now,
fair enough.
I got something to say.
Oh,
Yeah.
yes.
Okay. Yes. All
Oh,
right. Let's hear it. What have you got to say?
oh,
Hello.
okay.
Hello. Welcome to Pet Talk with me, Anna, and what's your name? We all Eddie, that's right. Okay. And our wonderful guest today, who is Suzanne Court. Hello, Suzanne.
Hi, Anna. Nice to be with you.
And it's a delight to have you on Pet Talk because what you are doing is a little bit different. Um,
Yeah.
so now, just to let everyone know, you have written a beautiful book called Soul Connection with Horses. So I guess maybe it might be nice to know how you got involved with horses.
Hmm. Well, I was one of those kids that always wanted a horse and nagged my parents endlessly, but back in the 60s, um, you couldn't have access to horses like you do today. You would literally have had to have your own horse in your own fields, which we didn't have. But every opportunity I could make, I would find myself with a horse, friends' horses. I made friends according to whether they had horses or not. Probably that bad. But it wasn't until I was an adult that I actually bought my own horse. In fact, I was 40 before I bought my own horse. And it just completely opened up a new world. I mean, loving horses and riding them was one thing, but actually having one was another thing altogether, because of course you are totally responsible for another being's well-being. And you get to know them very intimately when they're there right beside you where you're living or with you.
Absolutely. And I have not had the privilege yet of having that close a relationship with a horse, but I have lived with birds, I have lived with cats, and I now live with Teddy, this lovely
Teddy.
dog. And there is something incredibly special about having an intimate connection with a being from another species. So
Yeah.
I completely understand what you're saying. In your book, your book really, you talk about equine assisted counseling. Um, Tell us about that. What is this practice?
Right. Well, first and foremost, it's counselling, or therapy, whichever. I call it counselling because that's my background, my training. So essentially, it's still talking to somebody, figuring out what their presenting issues are, what their worries are, concerns, what they regard as deficits in their life, and so on. So it's the same as you would normally do if you went to a psychotherapist or any kind of therapist. However, with the horse is another being in the process, so it's triangulated. And what that does is it enables us to have the conversation with the animal, or to the animal. So um, if somebody is a little bit concerned about opening up, especially teenagers, children, people on the autistic spectrum and so on, might have difficulty looking directly at you and talking about themselves. They can look at the horse and talk about themselves in relation to the horse. And that opens up a number of things. First of all, it enables real connection with another being that is non-judgmental, that's living in the moment, that is confident in its beingness, doesn't have any problems with self-esteem itself. Horses are just very comfortable being who they are. And it enables the client to make a real connection with this very large animal. And so we can work on empathy, for instance. A lot of people have problems with empathy these days, especially with animals, because most people don't have animals or don't live in the country. And so just being in the country and being able to make that connection is in itself already a healing thing. And there's science in this, for this book, Soul Connection with Horses. And also since then, I've been following up on the science that's available. And that's one of the first things that comes up, is that it's proven that a human being in nature and being in the company of a large animal has physiological effects of a positive nature. So there's that real connection that you make with horses. Then there's also, horses are able to mirror us. They're able to mirror our thoughts and feelings. Now, this is where it starts sounding a wee bit spooky, because you can ask, how would a horse know what I'm thinking? They don't think in language, for one thing. And our thoughts. Our feelings is a little bit more easier to understand, because, of course, we have body language and we're expressing things about how we are in the world all the time by the way we hold ourselves. But the amazing thing is that horses actually, because they have a much greater sense of smell, they can smell everything that's going on in our bodies. So if we're fearful, for instance, we have adrenaline running around in the system. The horses smell that. They know straight away, with all the biochemical processes that are going on in our bodies, they know where we're at. So it's not really magical. And in fact, when you think about it, you know how sensitive a dog is to smell. You take them for a walk and you can't drag them away from the lovely smelly patches that they enjoy. Well, horses have the same heightened sense of smell, which is 40 times greater than ours. Our sense of smell. It doesn't mean that they're getting 40 times as many sensations coming to them, but they have that capacity of a greater sense of smell. So they know where we're at, and they pick up on that. And of course, they're very kind, sensitive beings. When they recognize where we are emotionally and in our being, they respond with kindness and compassion to that. And the other thing that happens with a client, with a person who's with a horse, is they start to make stories, metaphor. And we live through metaphor. Almost everything the way we express ourselves is metaphorical. And so this happens very naturally, that people will use metaphor, and they will also project onto the horse. They will say, oh, the horse doesn't like me because he just suddenly turned his head sideways. And you can use that information. You can then draw out, you can say, look, I'm curious why you think the horse doesn't like you, and you can draw out the story, and then the story can go into, do you feel like this quite often, and then the story becomes what happens in that person's life. And whatever they say is going on for the horse, you can pretty much guarantee that in their life there would be similar patterns. So if they have a story of rejection, it's likely that they have that story in their lives as well. And then finally, there's the soul-to-soul connection. There's the ability to look at another sentient being, especially with those beautiful big brown eyes, to look them in the eye and go, hello, you're in there and I'm in here, and to connect on a soul-to-soul basis, which is really what the book was about, soul-to-soul connection. But importantly, it's about connection. And this is what doing therapy with a horse is all about, really, is making that deep connection with another sentient being. So it's very healing. And science tells us that about 80% of healing when you're with a therapist, about 80% of that comes from the therapist being present. And so you add a horse into that, and being in nature of itself, someone just has to walk in and be with the horse and they already feel better. And of course, we follow that up with therapeutic processes.
You mentioned that horses respond with kindness and compassion. What does that
Yeah.
look?
Well, I'll give you an example. I have one horse who herself experienced grief. She had a foal, and for some reason, I know what the reason is, but we won't go into it here. Her owners at that time decided that she shouldn't have a foal, and killed the foal. And so, yeah, it's terrible, isn't it? And so when she arrived here, she was in a terrible state. She just would not connect. Her eyes looked dead. She wouldn't connect with human beings. And in fact, when we put her in with the other 6 horses, she wouldn't have much to do with them. She kept to herself. And I just let her be like that, let her find her own way for about 6 months. And she wouldn't let any human being go up to her. And very gradually, I did approach, retreat, approach, retreat, so that in the end, she allowed me to walk up to her and put my hand on her shoulder. And eventually, I could put my hand on her nose and stroke her. So this took time. Now she is a beautiful therapy horse. And at any time, I can walk up to her and she'll come with me. And in fact, I don't even need to put a halter on. I'll just stroke her on the head and walk off, and she will follow me. And that's because I spent all that time compassionately working with her. Well, she will do exactly the same for somebody else. So if I have a client who arrives and they themselves have some kind of grief issue, so they might have had a miscarriage, an abortion, lost a child, lost a parent, lost a friend, whatever. And sometimes I won't even know this ahead of time, and I'll just say, let's walk in with the horses and see who comes up to you. She is the one that will come up to somebody who is suffering from grief. And she'll do really beautiful things, like just very gently put her head on their shoulder, or just very gently breathe into, share breath with them, breathe into their nose. So I believe they see us with the same sort of compassion that we see them, if we treat them that way.
That is such a moving example that you've just given us. And it makes you wonder about this special relationship that we have with certain other species, dogs and horses. What do you know about the history that exists between our species?
Right. Well, there's always a certain amount of greyness the further you go back, but as far as we know, the earliest cave drawings of horses was about anything from an estimate 25 to 30,000 years ago in France. Beautiful, beautiful cave drawings. And a lot of cave drawings after that time showed horses and other large animals and humans nearby with spears in their hands. But this one from 25 to 30,000 years ago, there's no sign of anything like that. And just the way that the horses have been drawn, it really looks as though they're being venerated, they're being enjoyed just for what they are. So there's that connection way back. Then, well, horses originated in Ukraine, and then went over the Bering Strait to the States, and then further down to the Middle East. And at first, they were regarded as a good food source, but very gradually, around about 6,000 years ago, there's evidence that we started to invite them into our tribal situation and use them for various things. Of course, riding to start with, and then from then on, the history has been we've used them for war, for ploughing, for transport. These days we use them medically as well. We use them now, of course, for our own amusement, sports of many different kinds, racing and equestrian sports. So there's always been that connection of that ability for them to cooperate with us. I have to say that also in that history of 6,000 years, there's a fair bit of coercion going on. It's not just cooperation. And the big difference between horses and dogs historically is that dogs came to us. They were attracted to human beings, probably because they get little scraps of food and they could sit around our fire. So it was advantageous for them to be around us, and then it was advantageous for us to have them. And one thing I learned in doing this research is that dogs actually taught human beings how to hunt in groups. Before that, the evidence is that we hunted individually and not terribly successfully as hunter-gatherers. It was more gathering than hunting. But dogs showed human beings how to hunt, how to cooperate together and hunt in a pack. So that's pretty awesome. So the relationship between dog and human is one of much more cooperation. With horses, however, we would have had to have captured a horse, the first horse, to become domesticated. So there's, you know, given the option, I think horses would rather be wild and running around the plains and, you know, having access to about 25 kilometers a day that they can roam around and graze and browse. So as much as we try to make a natural situation for domestic horses, they are domesticated. They are in a captured environment. So we have to bear that in mind when we're with them. We have to bear it in mind that we haven't given them the option. So that's why when I work with them, I like to give them the option of whether they're going to work with me on a particular day or not. So that they do have some kind of options in the process.
It's vital that when we are working with another species or living with another species, that we understand the importance of giving options. And really what we're saying is working with consent. It's,
Absolutely.
you know, it's vital. I work very hard to make sure that Teddy has choices. So this is a very important aspect of connecting with another species, because this is how we build relationships and trust. I thought it was fascinating in your book, this idea that we are learning from another species. So that you talk about wolves and social skills that were developed as a result of our interaction with wolves. And I think this is a concept that we have lost because we're not living so closely with animals anymore. But there was something else that you mentioned in your book was that really made me smile and pay attention, and that horses taught people about herbs and roots. And you think about it, if you think about it, it makes complete sense that we living with other species or watching other species, being very close to nature, would have noticed if a plant made an animal sick and thought, oh, maybe that's not such a good idea. But that if, you know, an animal was eating plants and there were perhaps favorable effects that were noticed, it might make somebody oh, you know what? Maybe that's a good idea.
Yeah.
I've never thought of that possibility, and yet there it is.
Yeah, amazing, isn't it? This comes from Native American cultures, but possibly many other indigenous cultures as well. This is just the one that I happen to know about. And I mean, their relationship with the horse was pretty amazing. Um, Started in the 16th century when the Spaniards brought the horses to the United States. And then the horses that the American Indians came across were, of course, feral horses that had just got wild and then had populated areas. And they would go into, they would find a horse herd, and they would, a single warrior would walk behind the horse herd for some weeks, so that they would become accustomed to seeing that human being as part of the herd or following the herd. And then eventually one of the horses would start to take some notice, and then they would befriend each other, and then eventually be able to walk away, and the horse would walk with them. So it's a really beautiful way of connecting. Um, and so they're people who observed nature, had a very close relationship to nature, and through their observation, they saw that that the horses were able to self-medicate on various plants. And of course, horses, we tend to think of them as being in fields and they eat grass. That is very unnatural. They're not actually grazers. Naturally, they're not meant to be in a paddock or a field where they just eat one variety of greens, which is grass. They're actually browsers. So they're having their heads up high, and they'll be helping themselves to branches of trees and bushes and shrubs and so on. So I forget the relationship, but I think it's something like 60-40, something like 60% grazing and 40% browsing. So that's a significant part of their diet, which they miss out on unless we go to the trouble of actually planting various things around so that they can self-medicate. So we do that. We've planted a few things, but it's it's very minimal compared with what they would have access to in the wild.
But if we think other herd animals, I have seen cows do exactly that. Um,
Mm.
grab a branch and chew. um,
Mhm.
and deer as well do the same
Right,
thing.
they do, absolutely, which is why wild deer are culled. They are in this country anyway, because they were an introduced species, and they eat forests down. So they'll eat all the little trees that are trying to regenerate, and they'll eat existing trees up to a certain level where they can reach. Uh, yeah, so there you
You
are.
talk about natural horsemanship in your book.
Hmm.
That's a lovely term. Tell us about it.
Well, it's a bit of a misnomer, actually. I studied natural horsemanship with a vengeance. I mean, I was absolutely sold on it when I first started studying it, because it's a different paradigm to the normal way of dealing with horses. So the normal way of working with horses is, it's passed down from generation to generation. This is what you do. This is the kind of saddles and the kind of bridles and bits that you use, and you just learn according to what your family does, or your friends, or whoever happens to be teaching you. But there are many there are many aspects of how we deal with a horse that if you think about it, can pull you up a wee bit. For instance, the bits in the mouth, bits of metal. I mean, it can be done very humanely, but those bits of metal can be used very inhumanely as well. And you see it in top riders. You see it in Olympic, some, not all, obviously, but you see the odd thing happening that we can, pulls us up a bit. We think, oh, that's a little bit cruel. So natural horsemanship is attempting to use the natural tendencies the natural way in which horses learn, the way they learn from each other, is through pressure. So for instance, a mare with a young foal has to teach the young foal everything about living in horse community. So the young foal needs to know that he can't just bowl up to another horse and bite on another horse, or, you know, just interfere in every way imaginable, as young kids tend to do. So the mother will, with her nose, just push the foal away every now and then. And when she's had enough of the foal feeding on her, for instance, she'll go, come on, you can go now. And so she'll use her nose and push. So the way horses train each other is through putting on a bit of physical pressure. And as soon as the right response occurs, then that pressure is taken away. So in natural horsemanship, that's how you train a horse, by putting on very slight pressure with your hands. And as soon as the horse moves in the way you want, you release it. And that, of course, is exactly the same what you do when you're riding a horse. You put on pressure with the leg or the hands. And as soon as you get a response, you release that pressure. There are other ways, of course, of asking a horse to do things with fear and intimidation. So in natural horsemanship, all that fear and intimidation is taken out of the picture, and we just use that what's called negative reinforcement, which that negative sounds like a bad thing. It's not. It's just negative means that as soon as something you get the response, there's a negativity, there's a nothing that happens. So that's the basis of it, but unfortunately, it doesn't really follow through all the way. It doesn't really, the more I use the term, the more I don't want to use the term natural horsemanship, because really it's not. It's not natural. When you think about what we're doing with horses, it's all very unnatural from the horse's point of view. They are a herd animal, and we are a non-herd animal. Well, we are a herd animal as well. We like to live in groups, but we are predators. So that historically has been our role. So, and we smell of meat. Those of us that eat meat, we smell. Horses know what we eat. And so they allow a predator to sit on their back, right on top of in front, at the back of their shoulders, with full access to their neck, which is exactly where a lion would jump to bring down a horse. They would jump on the horse's back, and then they would lean around and go for the horse's jugular. So they allow us, a predator, to sit on their backs and direct them in terms of where to go, how far, how long, what directions, how fast, how slow, which is pretty amazing that they are prepared to do that. So for one thing, that's not natural. Although I do get the the desire to be as natural as possible is a great thing to try to do, so long as we realize that actually what we're doing with them living in domestic situations where we feed them, and we put things on their back, we put a lump of dead cow hide on their back and then jump on. It's all very unnatural. But the intention behind it is to build a relationship. And this is the part that I really enjoy, is building a relationship through communication, and to make that communication as equal as possible. It's not entirely equal, but we try to be to give the horse the opportunity to say no. Actually, it gives them some agency. I mean, you can imagine, as a human being, if you had no agency in terms of what you did, when, how often, how far, how long, if you had no agency in that, imagine what that would do to your spirit. So with a horse, I mean, we have 7 horses that are part of the therapy process. When a client is coming, so I know somebody's coming, or they have arrived already, I invite a horse to be part of it. If they don't want to that particular day, that's absolutely fine. So if they won't allow me to put the halter on in a way that's not I'm not actually catching the horse, I'm inviting them. And if they don't take up that invitation, that's fine. I've got 6 others and I go with another horse.
Yes, and that is exactly how it should be. So what do you think that the horse is getting out of this beautiful working relationship, um, where they are acting as therapists in a very equine way?
That's a very good question, Anna. Very, very good. If I look at the wider picture and ask the question, what are they getting out of being with human beings at all? About living with us in a domestic situation. What they're getting out of that is survival. Because if we didn't have ways in which we wanted to utilize these animals, I don't think they would exist anymore. Since World War II, when it was the last time horses were used as cavalry. Since then, as far as I know, they haven't been used. So that's in that capacity. We also don't use them for ploughing paddocks, at least not in very many parts of the world. So and of course for transport. And so they have got past that period of being hugely utilitarian for humanity. So I think without domestication, they probably wouldn't exist, or just in tiny pockets here and there. So that's one thing. But on an individual level, what they get out of it. If I think about it from the horse's perspective, they're able to wander around in our property. We've only got 11 acres, but it's all devoted to horses and trees. And they can go anywhere on that property. We have what's called a track system, so that they can move right around the whole property. And we have individual paddocks that are opened up at any one time that they can freely move in and out of, but otherwise they have access to the whole place. So they have that freedom, relative freedom, which we can see that they enjoy. They enjoy running around. They enjoy finding different places to stand. They can stand in a forested area, or they can stand right out in the open, or they can wander through a river. They can slosh their way through a pond. So they enjoy that relative freedom. In terms of working with us as a fellow therapist, this is anthropomorphizing, obviously, but I look at them and I think they enjoy their work. And why do I say that? I say that because when they know a client is coming, they will come up to the fence and go, hello, we've got somebody arriving. That's nice. And when somebody does arrive, they're interested and they're looking, and they're not trying to get away. So that's a good sign with an animal if they're trying to get away from a situation. And when they're working with a client, there's very little that's asked of them physically. We're not putting a saddle on because none of it involves riding, not what we do in any case. And so it's very easy. All they're doing is standing and listening, or we might ask the client to take the horse for a walk, and we might ask the client to walk the horse over a little jump and around a few obstacles and so on. So it's very easy for them. And, it's quite possible to read a horse's emotional state just in the same way that we read each other. Like right now, I can tell that you're reasonably calm and that you appear to be happy. You've got a smile on your face. Your eyes are, twinkling, and you're nodding. So you're giving me all these signs of listening to me and being comfortable doing so. Well, I can do that because I've been around horses for so long now. I can see exactly the same sort of responses from horses. So they have expressions around their mouth, around their nose, around their eyes, and their ears are very expressive. The height of their head in relation to their body is a form of expression. Whether they're looking at you sideways or straight on, another form of expression. Whether their tail is swishing and so on, but they're very, very subtle. And so if you don't know horses well, you can look at a horse and think there's really nothing going on. But the more you look at them, the more you realize how expressive they are. And the reason they're not overtly expressive in the way that we would be is because, of course, they are herd animals. So they don't want to be overly expressive when they're in the herd, drawing attention to themselves, because there might be a tiger or a cougar lying in the grass going, oh, there's a horse that's unhappy. I'll just pick him out of the herd. Or here's a horse that's overexcited and has got slightly away from the rest of the herd. So those are dangerous situations. So herd animals have learned to confine their emotional expression to a small range of expression. They also express themselves with sound. They have like 6 or so sounds that they make that have specific meaning. As far as we can tell, there's probably a whole lot more meaning there that we don't know about. So in answer to your question, I look at the horses as I'm working. I'm constantly reading them. I'm constantly reading the client, and I'm constantly reading the horse, and I'm constantly reading myself, because how I am in the situation is very important. If I've got any tension or business that needs attending to psychologically or physically, I'm going to be inadvertently passing that on to the horse and passing it on to the client if I'm not careful. So I make sure that I'm in a good frame of mind before a client comes. So I'm reading the horse for 2 reasons. One is I want to know how the horse is feeling, but also I want the client to be able to respond to what is actually happening with the horse. So although there's metaphorical things happening, there is story making going on, there's projection going on, there's also that real connection. And one of the most beautiful things you can do therapeutically is assist somebody to make a real connection with another being, especially a very large being. There's something about the size of a horse being 5 or 6 times bigger and heavier than us, and there they are right in front of us as gentle giants. There's something really moving about that. But yeah, in answer to your question, I read the horse, I observe how they are in the environment. To me, they look like they're very happy and enjoy their work.
I don't think it's anthropomorphizing at all, because what you're doing is you're actually making that statement based on what you're seeing as signals that the horse is giving, in the same way that I can tell when Teddy is happy. It's very clear when Teddy is happy. It's very clear when he's not happy. So this is not anthropomorphizing. It is simply understanding that another species has emotion,
Yeah.
and that they communicate that emotion. So it's very important, because many people, whenever they are dealing with animals, they want to deny them an emotional nature. And
Mm.
the things they do is they say, oh, well, that's just us projecting. And we want to make that clear. It is not just us projecting.
Mm.
This is very important. And I could see that, for whatever reason, many horses enjoy the company of humans, in the same way that many dogs and many cats enjoy the company of humans.
Yeah.
We don't know why, but they do.
Yeah. I mean, it's a beautiful gift, isn't it, that they're giving us, really?
Exactly. Clearly, you're meeting their needs at a physical level, but it seems to me that you're meeting their needs at an emotional level as well.
Yeah.
And so they are getting that out of it. But why they would want to then connect with strangers, that's the
Mm.
mystery bit. And that's the magic, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah. It's curiosity, I think. I mean, they've already made bonds with the people that they live with, so they're okay with human beings. And I think it's simply a case of, oh, here's another one. Let's see what this one's like. And
Indeed.
yeah. And about anthropomorphizing, I was just reading something recently about Jane Goodall, wonderful Jane Goodall, who's now, I think, 94, something like that. Well, when she first started doing her research with chimpanzees, she, after about 3 years of working with them, she was persuaded to join a PhD program in Cambridge University. And she hadn't done any academic work before that, but she had made these incredibly careful observations and recorded everything that she saw. But she had given the chimpanzees names, and she was discussing them along terms of Freud or Floyd, I think was one of them. Floyd wants to do this, wants to do that. So attributing human emotions and motivations to the chimpanzees. And so she was told that she couldn't do that she was doing it all wrong, that academically you don't anthropomorphize. So that term is used as a negative criticism, but actually I see it as not a criticism, as just for the reasons you just explained. Because if you think of what anthropomorphizing means, it means attributing to another species the same sort of inner world, inner experience that we have. And the more I spend time with animals, dogs, cats, horses, birds, the more I realize that we share the same world. We are more the
World.
same, we are different.
Absolutely. And here's the thing. You actually gave us an example of a horse reading somebody's emotional state and recognizing it based on her emotional experience and responding to that. Now,
Right.
what's that horse doing? Is she projecting her feelings onto the human being?
Mhm.
What we're really talking about is connection at an emotional level,
Yeah.
where we are recognizing an animal's emotional state
Mm.
and responding to that with empathy in the same way that we do see animals responding with empathy to us. And it's not our imagination, it's very clear what you described there. It is
Yeah.
happening. And I think that's the moment when my father was dying, and there were tears coming down my face. And Teddy, who is not, he's very tuned in with me, but he lets me get on with life. He's not overly concerned about whether I'm happy or not.
Right.
In a sense, But in that moment, he knew I wasn't happy, and he
Mm.
came, licked my tears away.
Yeah.
And so, and then he was done, he was off. So, he's not the kind of dog who's going to sit with me and fuss over me. But it
Mm.
was, hey, you're not happy. And I can feel that. Let me do something to show you that
Mm.
I've noticed and I care.
Yeah.
And that was lovely. It was a lovely moment. So this happens. We those of us who are privileged enough to live with animals have these moments, because obviously we're emotional and we know when they're recognizing it. So
Yeah.
it's very important that we recognize we're doing the same thing as well.
Yeah. Yeah. The big difference between us and dogs and horses, of course, is we have emotions, but we try to hide them or deny them or complicate them with our thinking. So we go, oh, I feel very bad today about this or that. Oh, no, I shouldn't feel like that. Oh, well, I'm just going to put it to one side and get on with my work, So we don't necessarily deal with emotions as they come up. Because, of course, it's difficult, it's work, something to do. So it's much easier many times to think, well, what I want to do today is far more important than what I'm feeling. So I'll just push that to one side and get on with life. Now, horses have taught me personally so much about myself. if I go in and spend time with horses and think I'm feeling fine, but then I get a bit of a reaction from them, and they might be moving away from me, or just not that connection that I'm expecting. Then I question myself, how am I feeling today? Oh, it's a bit of a knot in my stomach. Oh, I'm a bit tight in the shoulders. What am I thinking about? Oh, okay, I'm thinking about that. Well, no wonder. And so they can tell me I'm in a particular state of mind before I even know it myself.
Present.
That's so honest. They don't complicate their reactions. They don't complicate their emotional life with thought. And of course, that's where that's where all our complications come from.
And what struck me listening to you is that when you're in your feelings, you're not present. And animals, if you're not present. In the
Yeah,
same, children know if you're not present.
absolutely.
You may be paying attention, but you're not fully there, and they
Yeah.
always know. Well, Suzanne, what a wonderful book you have written. And just a reminder to everyone, it is called Soul Connection with Horses. And I thank you for being up at the crack of dawn, given that you're in New Zealand.
You're welcome. The sun isn't even up yet, so I can go outside and enjoy that.
You're going to have a beautiful dawn, I hope. Thank you so much today.
Thank you. It was a pleasure talking with you, Anna. Thank you.
Now, before you go, if people want to find you, do you have a website?
I have a website, yes. It's called Earth Horse. So www.earthhorse, one word, .co.nz.
Wonderful. Thank you.
And the book, of course, it comes out. The book is being launched in about 10 days' time. So it's available on Amazon and any bookstores.
Perfect. I'll be putting a link to both your website and the book in the description box. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Anna.
And thank you all for watching. Until next time, goodbye.
Goodbye.